This is Jessica.
And this is Kelly. And this is the Chasing Brighter
podcast.
Hi, everybody. Today, Kelly and I are going to be doing part one of our book club, Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. Kelly and I both became aware of this book by listening to Dr. Peter Attia's 3-part series, interviewing Dr. Walker and talking about how important sleep is. And so Kelly and I are going to today go through the 4 parts of the book and
talk about what we learned and what we liked about the book. And, I think we also need to give a shout out to our cousin, Sophia Lyon, because I don't think we would have discovered The Drive, and we definitely wouldn't have stumbled upon the sleep podcast with Dr. Peter Attia and Dr. Walker without her recommendation. I think she had thrown that out to us when we saw her a couple of years ago. And so it really was enlightening. And when we started this podcast and we really talked about health, one of the things that we wanted to talk about was sleep. Sleep is the cheapest and easiest way that you can improve your health.
Yeah, your overall well-being.
Yes.
And as we've talked about, the month of September for us has been trying to care for yourself, right? Caring for yourself, kids are at school, and one of the number one things you can do to improve mental clarity, overall well-being, is to ensure that you're getting enough sleep. So join us today on our discussion on why we sleep. Okay, Kelly.
All right. It was a lot. Yeah. And so it's good because a lot of deep references and stuff, it's good to actually have the physical book. But just kind of listening along the way on the audio as I'm, through the house or whatever. I love Audible. It allows me to read while I'm doing some mundane tasks, which I enjoy doing. And
he has a PDF, an accompanying PDF with this Audible. And so a lot of times when an Audible book has a lot of references to the PDF, then I want to get the book. And I think that happened in this case. There's a lot of charts, a lot of figures, a lot of graphs that he refers to. And so it's like, I wanted to have that all in one place. And then there was so much research going on in this book that I needed to look at it and highlight it and write it down so my brain could figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's a sleep Bible. And I think this was one of those books that many versions of this book or many people will reference. And this is like the source of truth, right? Or single source of truth for sleep. And so what we want to do is talk through, what we got out of the book. It's split into 4 sections, and we're just going to kind of go section by section and talk through some highlights. We're not going to be able to dive in too deep. Definitely if you want to learn more, we encourage you to read the book. But hopefully we can bestow upon you some insights that we found in the book.
Mm-hmm. This thing called sleep. I think one of the things that stuck out for me in this book was that sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our brains and bodies. And in this section, he basically goes through evolution and why humans have always spent 30% of their life sleeping. Right. And kind of why that is. And every society that did it and kind of exploring every society and all of these studies. And one of the big studies was that study that described what we call our natural circadian rhythm. So we all have our own internal clock that drives our sleep and wake periods. And so for me, my awake period might be 16 hours, my sleep 8, and Kelly, right, yours might be 16.5 and 8, right?
Well,
so
I
go a
actually
little
know,
over 24 hours.
And I know exactly about my sleep because I just have completely nerded out on sleep. And I have a Fitbit along with an Apple Watch, but I wear my Fitbit in a lot of ways because your Fitbit will give you a sleep score, and it does it.
And it breaks down your sleep cycles a little bit more than the Apple Watch.
Well, in the Apple Watch, it'll do it, but you have to download some third-party apps. And then I think the Apple Watch is a little more cumbersome to wear at night.
Okay. So do you know your circadian rhythm? You have the stats on that, or?
I don't know what that would be.
But you have data on your, I used to wear, so after we listened to Dr. Peter Attia's 3-part series with Dr. Matthew Walker, I went crazy with my sleep and I wore my Fitbit every night all the time to get a baseline and to kind of see where I was. In the book, he talks about there are 4 phases of sleep. The Fitbit does 3 phases: light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. And so I was not getting a lot of REM sleep. And so by troubleshooting and working really hard and doing all kinds of things, which I know we're going to talk about in part 2 of our book club series, is just kind of looking at how you can try to make sure that you're getting equal amounts of those sleep phases. And so I was able to do that with the wearable. How about you, Cal?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it just, I think this book has been helpful, right? Because it's like, as we continue on our own discovery journeys, learning about why it's important and learning about the different phases. So yeah, I think in the first section, it was fascinating that humans of all things really need sleep in a way that no other living being needs it.
Because there was a connection on like brain size and need for more sleep, right? So like the more intelligent, they were kind of linking like the more intelligent a species is, the more sleep that species will need. And I think the last thing I want to say on this, on part 1 of the book would just be, we have a morning, there are, 30 to 40% of us are a morning type, 30 to 40% of us are an evening type. And then there's a rest that's kind of in the middle. So they, like a morning lark or a night owl. And so if you're interested to know like and that's very, very closely tied to genetics, very, very closely to what your parents, how their circadian rhythm would be. So if that's something you're really, really interested in, online, there's a ton of free tests to find out, whether you're a morning person or an evening person. It's called an MEQ test because it's morningness, eveningness questionnaire. So you can go online, and if you want to find more about it too, we have a link on our blog post that will guide you to where you can take an MEQ test.
What do you think you are, Jess? A lark or an owl?
After reading the book, I think I'm a lark. How about you?
I'm for sure a lark.
And I think I would define that by when are you most
productive?
Thank you. I'm the most productive in the morning. And then by 3 p.m., I'm done.
Well, and it also talks about, and I think the book comes around to this many times, which is just how culture and society have evolved. And it really is becoming counter to what is kind of your natural human existence. And one of the things is that the world is built on
for morning larks,
the larks. So if you're a night owl, you automatically have a disadvantage because the owls stay up late.
Right. You're starting to be productive when work is over.
Yeah.
And I think, and also just kind of talking about me being tired at 3, it was really validated because he said everyone's wakefulness dips at 3. It's a global thing. People used and other cultures, still a lot of countries have the siesta.
Mm-hmm.
And that one fact, I'm going to try, I love facts and I love research. I'm going to try not to give too much research, but one of my favorite ones is they did that study in Greece of 25,000 people who took away the siesta from 1 to 5. Because, as societies became more industrialized and not so agricultural, they kind of took away the siesta, and there was a 37% increase in heart disease, and the mortality rate increased by 60% for working men. So I would be a proponent of bringing back a siesta because I do dip at 3 p.m. in my wakefulness, but anyway.
Yeah. So that was part 1, and it's got a lot of good foundational information and insights. And then we move into the next section of part 2.
Yeah. Why should you sleep? So to me, I felt like part 2 was very much like, I want anyone who tells me I'll sleep when I die, or I'm just a person that doesn't need a lot of sleep. I just need 3 hours of sleep. I just need 4 hours of sleep. Please just go read section 2 of the book. Because to me, it's basically like, these are all of the horrible things that are happening to you by not getting enough sleep and by being sleep deprived. What was your kind of interpretation of that section?
Yeah. I mean, I thought the first page of that section on chapter 6, where it's like scientists discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer, enhance your memory, makes you more creative, makes you look more attractive, keeps you slim, lowers food cravings. It's like all the things, right? Reduces risk of cancer and dementia, wards off
Sign me up.
colds, right? And
Yeah.
it's sleep. This is where it's like,
Yeah.
it's the single most important thing you can do to just live longer is just make sure you're getting enough sleep.
Yeah. I think the scariest thing for me, and this is what, we heard on the Drive podcast, was that, lack of sleep is recognized as a lifestyle factor contributing to the risk of developing Alzheimer's. And that's a lot of the research that Dr. Walker is doing. He's at the Sleep Research Center at Berkeley. And so to me, Alzheimer's and losing your faculties to me is kind of one of the worst ways. Dementia, all of those things was the worst thing that could happen to you and declining and aging. And so to me, it's like, oh, what the number one thing you can do to help prevent it would be sleeping. Okay.
That's definitely a game changer. And I know, I feel like our parents raised us to value sleep in a lot of ways. Don't you feel that way? Or like, do you feel like I was always,
you were incredibly disciplined. You were very disciplined of like, I'm going to sleep. You could be at a sleepover.
I was the first one to go to sleep.
Camp. Yeah. You'd be like, peace out, everybody. I'm going to sleep. I did in adolescence transition to being up later. And I had a TV in my room and I don't know, mom and dad didn't really pay attention. I remember staying up till 11, but we had kind of a late start time ish. I don't know. So like I would sleep till 7. So I was getting 8 hours of sleep because I would sleep as long as possible, roll out of bed and go to school.
Yeah.
I would cause us to be late.
One of the things we would just eat our toast in the car. One of the things that was super fascinating is, do you remember the part in the book about the pianist and how he told him how he practices something and he gets frustrated and he can't quite get a certain, line or refrain or whatever in his practice. And then he goes to sleep and he wakes up and he plays it perfectly, and how there's now scientific evidence that while you're sleeping, you're learning, and how it also lends itself for creative people, right? That like people are more creative when they get more sleep. It also, there is this, I think common knowledge is if, when your kids are going through standardized tests, to make sure they get enough sleep the night before. And it seems like all of that stuff is now
how learning and memory are all so connected to sleep. And I think it's like, it can't be broken up into nap. It's like, we need to go through all 4 phases of sleep for us to be able to have all of those benefits. And, a nap will not salvage learning, memory, emotional stability, complex reasoning, or decision making, right? All of that is negatively impacted with lack of sleep, right? There's an increase of heart attacks, cancer, mortality rate increases with lack of sleep. Yeah. And also because what's scary is that people don't know how sleep deprived they are and consistently underestimate how impaired they are. So it's like, no, I'm fine. I'm going to drive. Right. And it's driving while impaired. By being tired, you are driving while impaired.
Absolutely.
And also people get used to this lower level of functioning and they think it's normal. So they don't think they're tired because their body is used to functioning that way. And that becomes their baseline.
Yeah.
So that, I think that that's, all the stuff I had for section 2. Anything else, Kel, why we should sleep?
Yeah. So I think you talked about it, but we'll just kind of, again, reiterate it, which is lack of sleep. There was a study about how they took 2 different groups, and one was sleep deprived, and how their arteriosclerosis risk went up because their arteries began calcifying. Which is crazy to me that like you are increasing your risk of stroke and heart attack just by not sleeping regularly.
so many tests on where they would have people, with your brain functioning, like push this button, push this button, push this button. This group gets 8 hours of sleep. This group gets 4 hours of sleep. This, right. And then push the button, push the button. And so talking about like, there was a group that just didn't push the button at all. Like your brain just stopped for like a few seconds.
Yes.
And so think about driving. Okay, this person had 6 hours of sleep and they didn't push the button when they were supposed to. So how are reaction times if someone runs across the street? If something happens, our brain stops processing just for a split second how that impacts our decision making. But I think so, like you're saying, so many studies on like, we study these people, we reduce sleep, and these are all the horrific and horrible things that happen to them because they weren't sleeping. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's terrifying to think about the fact that a vast majority of people are not getting enough sleep and everyone's driving a car, and traffic related accidents have got to be tied to people not being rested.
I will never forget that where and I know we're going to get to school start times, but just how when they changed school start times in Wyoming, how it decreased car accidents by like 80%. That's insane. By pushing back school start times, like that's incredible. I mean, it's so heavily supported by research how important sleep is, right? And then we kind of transition into part 3 of the book, how and why we dream. So the dream phase is REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. So if you've ever held your little kids in your arms, watch your kids sleep, watch your partner sleep, you can tell there's a part in a phase in their sleep when their eyes are closed and you can see their eyes moving back and forth. And that is the dreaming part of our sleep. And one of the things, and you were kind of talking about that, Kelly, with creativity, how many famous musicians have talked about they woke up while they were in REM, jumped out of bed, wrote the song, and they're all these like amazing songs like Satisfaction from the Rolling Stones. He wrote that, woke up. He woke up and saw that his recorder was recording and didn't know why and played it back. And he had got up in the middle of the night, played the intro to Satisfaction and went back to sleep like while he was in REM. So there's a lot of creativity happening there.
It's amazing how your brain is working all the time in that way.
Yeah. And I have a lot of clients that will tell me, oh, I'm dreaming about this. Why am I dreaming about this? Can you tell me why we're dreaming about this? And I thought it was really cool that in chapter 10, he says dreaming as overnight therapy, and how while we're in REM sleep, our brain is reprocessing the day. And so it helps reduce our emotional connection. So if something happened during the day to us that was very emotional, that evoked strong emotions, if we were able to get the appropriate length of REM sleep, if we talk about it again or are faced with that same situation, we are more emotionally disengaged from that. So it's not as emotionally triggering for us. And so then that goes into PTSD. So a lot of people are having nightmares and PTSD. The studies were showing that those people are not getting the appropriate amount of REM sleep. So REM sleep helps us learn how to navigate this scary world and helps us reprocess our memories. And interesting, our brain doesn't work that way in childhood. Our brain does not start to prepare us to process the world until adolescence, which is really interesting, right? How the way our brain utilizes REM sleep changes as we go through the life cycle, which is really fascinating. So, our REM sleep is having us process through the day. So I thought that was really cool.
Well, and I think it's fascinating how interconnected things are in terms of like understanding in the book, certain things that we do block REM sleep. So if you're already experiencing trauma or something that's stress inducing, even when and many of us are stressed out, right? It's triggering the sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system, whatever it is that handles the stress piece. Yeah. And if REM is supposed to help you wrestle with things, but you're having multiple glasses of wine or alcohol before you go to bed or all those things which suppress your REM, then it's also further exacerbating, right? Yeah. That trauma or stress or whatever it is that you're experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. So that whole section, was just kind of about dreams and REM, right? Why REM sleep is so important. And just like what we talked about before, if you don't know what phases you're getting, or you're not quite sure, or you're having nightmares, or you're bothered by your dreams, a wearable can really help collect data for you to see what phase of sleep you're in, because they can tell by your pulse.
And I think and we can also post a link to other like sleep surveys. If you don't have a wearable or don't want a wearable, there are mechanisms to even track, like, if you like don't eat sugar before bed, if you didn't do all the things, it should be able to predict like that you had a good night's sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how about part 4, Cal?
Yeah. So part 4 really gets into, I think, the meat of, in a lot of ways, how it's impacting us in reality. So you could have, up to this point, you could have been like, I sleep great because I take Ambien. Don't take Ambien.
Right. So the title of section 4 is From Sleeping Pills to Society Transformed.
And so a lot of that is, anything that, whether, caffeine is technically, after reading this book, you should not consume caffeine.
So let's talk about this. Okay. So I want to talk about caffeine. It's so interesting. So first of all, should not be having caffeine. I've had several healthcare providers talk about some of the things I struggle with can be from inflammation caused by caffeine. So I went off caffeine for like 2 years. And then recently I'm like, you know what? I think I need to go back off caffeine. Right. And I don't know, by the way, I'm not 100% off caffeine, because I'm going to have chocolate or a tea or something like that. So to me, it's coffee. Right. So I'm not drinking coffee.
Fair to say.
And I think pretty early on in the book, he said, when you have caffeine, you don't know when that's going to impact you. 50% of the caffeine wakes you up, and the other 50% of the caffeine floats in your body and is released whenever.
Well, and as we get older, because it's how our body, with anything, alcohol is the same, but I mean, it's how our body metabolizes the caffeine, and everybody's body is very different in terms of how it metabolizes it. So when they talk about only having coffee or caffeine in the morning, it's because there's a general assumption that your body metabolizes it by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I think as a rule of thumb, limiting your coffee in the morning, limiting yourself to 2 cups, which I think is generally what people say to do, and then not drinking caffeine in the afternoon.
And recognizing that decaf does have caffeine in it. So it will, it could stay in your body. And I think with everything, I talk about this all the time, listen to your body. I am a person that can drink caffeine and go right to bed. Like I could, but I'm not saying I'm getting the sleep phases, and I'm not saying I haven't done the research, and because I don't regularly do that. Yeah. But like if we were out to dinner, my husband would not necessarily get coffee, because he would say I'll be up all night, right? So he already knows caffeine wakes me up. I can't have coffee at night. I'm a person that could. I would only be having it if you're out to dinner or something, right? And you have,
I mean, if I'm out to dinner, it's a big meal, and you're having, lots of bottles of wine and lots of courses, and then dessert comes, and, I'll order a cappuccino or something. I feel like it's not a much, but at this point, I've already had sugar after 8:00. I've already had wine, plenty of wine.
Right.
Like, my sleep's going to be wrecked anyway. And so I think part of this is, to me, is like coming to terms with the fact that nobody's perfect and everyone has their vices. I think if you are spending a majority of your time focusing and making sure you have good sleep, you're going to not have good sleep sometimes. You're going to make bad choices, and it's going to not be good. But maybe the next day, don't plan on taking a test, or don't plan on taking a road trip, right? Or knowing that you're not going to have good, clear thinking, because without a clear mind, and your brain didn't get enough time, right, to do the things it needed to do.
Yeah. And I think, again, it just reaffirmed, like, okay, for me, caffeine causes inflammation. It impacts the way I feel. And then I'll read this book and I'm like, okay, right. Like it's smacking. It's kind of like highlighting this is universe telling you, keep on your road of the no caffeine. Again, for me, that's coffee, because I did have a chai tea this morning, which I know it was made from black tea, and I know black tea has caffeine. So I had like 4 ounces of chai, plain chai.
Well, and it's also like, know your body. And that's part of this whole, with Chasing Brighter, about like taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes taking care of yourself means that you also need this social, emotional cup of coffee or whatever it is that you need that you feel like
right. If that was horrifying to give up your coffee, take the coffee. Drink the coffee.
Because part of it is just like being happy and doing things that, make you happy.
Absolutely.
If it's needing two giant carafes of coffee every day, that's too much. That needs to be something you might want to rethink.
Yeah.
Everything in moderation.
I'll never forget. Do you remember it was like when you first started working out of college? I remember you telling this story and you were like at work and you went to get coffee. You're like, are you serious? Someone just drank all the coffee, and you realized you were the only one drinking coffee that morning and you had drank the whole pot of coffee.
I really
remember that, and I made up that whole story. No, I just remember because I wasn't a coffee drinker until I had kids, and you were like, "Oh my gosh, someone's like who's drinking the coffee?" And you recognized like you were going back, and you were the only one that was drinking coffee that day, and you had a whole pot. I just remember that story. Like think about that, right? For so many of us, I think a lot of people aren't paying attention, and they're just getting more coffee,
that was when I was in my 20s, and I probably had a great metabolism. It broke it down a lot easier.
I didn't have coffee till I had my eldest, and mom came to stay with me. And so we had a coffee pot for guests. And I remember making mom coffee. And then I was like, I'm going to have a cup. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm awake. This is incredible. It was like magical. I felt like I had discovered caffeine.
We probably need to have a specific podcast episode on coffee because, I have my whole coffee obsession. And I can talk more about my own personal coffee journey at that time.
You're right. We can. Don't drink it, but we're going to have another episode about how amazing it is.
Yes. Yeah. So the other part about this section was then the next thing, which is about alcohol. The fact that having alcohol, particularly in the afternoon/evening, does not help one to induce natural sleep, and it suppresses REM sleep.
Yeah. But don't you feel like that? I don't know. I feel like that's kind of common knowledge that maybe not, but I'm going to connect this to sleeping pills. And when I listened to Dr. Matthew Walker in an interview, he had said taking sleeping pills knocks you unconscious, but you're not going through the cycles of sleep. So I could hit you over the head with the frying pan. You could be knocked out for 8 hours, and you could take a sleeping pill. Those are the same things. You will not get the REM sleep. And I would say for me, in my practice, instinctually and anecdotally, that's always the first thing I was working on with clients is like, how's your sleep? Because so many people I see, particularly people with PTSD, suffer with insomnia. And it's like, to me, that always has made sense. Like, how can you be your healthiest, happiest self and not be getting sleep? Like, we've got to figure out sleep, right? How can you do all the things we need to do in therapy that take energy and brain power and concentration and memory if you're not sleeping? Right. That seemed intuitive to me. And so very few of my clients have taken sleeping pills, but we want to be like, okay, let's look at our sleep hygiene and what steps can you take so you can get yourself to sleep without the aid of a sleep aid, because you are not going to be getting the phases of sleep.
And this book really talks about a lot of the very common components of sleep. One of the things that it kind of didn't dive in as much deeply to is the cortisol and like your levels of cortisol and your ability to how that impacts sleep. I don't feel like it. Did you feel like it covered that at all?
A little bit, talking about melatonin, talking about adrenaline, especially in the REM
the other hormones.
Phases, the hormones, adrenaline, and it's not epinephrine, it's something do you not remember which one that was? There was something, and that was with the PTSD stuff on what your body was releasing.
And so I guess what I wanted to just comment on too is if you are stressed, you're going to have crappy sleep if you're not taking care of yourself as well.
And that's going to impact the hormones that your body is releasing during the phases. And then that's going to impact your production of melatonin.
So, a lot of this, I feel like the final chapter was just about all the things that can come into play in terms of impacting your sleep, as well as some other interesting facts, right? So it talked about the school start times and accidents, sleep disorders, and many sleep disorders, which is why people aren't able to get good sleep. can affect so many things, but one with kids was ADHD. And it talked about 50% of kids that have been diagnosed with ADHD actually have sleep disorders, which was fascinating to me. And it went into sleep apnea, or how kids can't breathe and they snore at night, so they need to get their adenoids removed, and how that actually improves their sleep. And then ultimately, a lot of them might have their ADHD goes away.
Oh, I have had a handful of kids that were in my practice years ago that had their adenoids removed, which impacted their sleep and then reduced their hyperactivity and attention deficit.
Really?
For sure. So, yeah, absolutely. Yep. So incredible. And and I remember one case in particular where they had a really hard time getting their child to sleep. They had so much energy, they had a really hard time. They were trying melatonin, and all of that was improved after the removal of the adenoids. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
And it's like, depending on where your kids, they're not in your room with you necessarily for you to kind of know what's happening with them sleep wise.
Yes.
But I think it's like, let's add that to a list of things we're checking off. When it's like, oh, my kid's experiencing this, bumping up, let me check out their sleep, to the top, right? If you could bump up how that's going, which reminds me, by the way, Dominic got a Fitbit. I'm curious. I think I want to have him wear it to bed for a week to get some information on how his
That's a good idea. Both my kids have Fitbits.
Yeah, and kind of see where their information is. And the other thing is talking about melatonin. We have used melatonin and do use melatonin in our home. And he talked about really your body produces, right? So when the sun goes down and it starts getting darker, our body starts to produce melatonin. That's why blue light and screens and iPads and all of those things aren't good to have before sleep, because it reduces our body's production of melatonin, which again is the sleep hormone and helps you get tired. And so, but melatonin isn't just released at the beginning of sleep, it's released throughout the night. And so depending on what kind of melatonin supplement you're taking, it may not be a good quality one. It may not be a high percentage of melatonin. It may not be a time release melatonin. And so he doesn't necessarily see the benefits. He doesn't say don't take melatonin, but in his studies, it wasn't that helpful in getting people to sleep. However, they noticed that as you are aging, melatonin does help you sleep, because as we go through, it's like as you get, teenagers need a lot of sleep. And as we get older, past 40, the bladder stops working as well. It's waking us up at night. We're waking up a lot at night. And then older people, how they say older people don't need a lot of sleep? That's a myth and not true. And everyone needs an appropriate amount of sleep. And they have found that melatonin is helpful with, people over 60.
Yeah, didn't it? It was something about how you're actually not waking up because you have to go to the bathroom. You're waking up and then you're going to the bathroom. So it wasn't actually going to the bathroom that's waking you up.
But when we're awake, we're not fully awake. And that's when there are a lot of falls for people. And that's when a lot of people are getting hurt, breaking hips, things like that. And so he talked several times in the book, about reducing water consumption at certain times at night, because we don't want to be waking up, because waking up negatively impacts and disrupts our sleep. So that was all interesting. I'm thinking about cutting off my water. I'm going to start being aware of it and start slowly cutting back to see if I can. Because I do wake up a lot. I drink a ton of water to see if I could sleep through the whole night without being in the bathroom.
I feel like it
happens after 40, which is where I'm at.
I feel like it's a win for me if I sleep till 5 a.m. and then go to the bathroom and then go back to sleep.
That would be incredible for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, all in all, a lot of great information. It definitely is one of those books where some of it you knew, a lot of it you didn't know, but the overall goal of the fact that everyone knows they need to get enough sleep. And I think to what you're saying is, for people to say they don't need enough sleep is actually BS.
They've become desensitized to it, and they think that the way they're functioning is optimal, and it's not.
There was that whole section, which I did not even want to listen to or read too much, which was about how you should ask your doctor before a procedure how much sleep they had before. Did you remember that part? But it was
no.
When you meet with your doctor before they do anything, you should ask them how much sleep they had the night before.
No,
just so true in the medical community. That's another thing he doesn't really tackle is, the medical community prides itself on having people who can perform with little sleep, which isn't right.
Because Dr. Peter Attia talked about how he would sleep, what did he say, 40 hours a week when he was in residency?
No, it's terrible, especially if you're working ER or anything else.
Justin does surgery, and Justin has always been so serious about sleep before surgery. Like if someone asks us to do something, he's like, I have surgery the next day. He will not take any medication or anything the night before he has surgery. And on the morning that he does have surgery, he will not have caffeine that morning.
So, but somewhere along the way, he learned that, or somebody taught him as a medical professional that that's the responsible thing to do.
Or I guess I think it's like just personally, that's the kind of person that he is. Like Justin's a very serious, responsible person. And so
somebody told him that that's the responsible thing. That's what I'm saying though, right?
Right. I mean, well, just awesome. I would say at some point knowing he was probably taught, right, to listen to his body and know like, and we're all, and we're very serious with the kids, as I know you are too. If there's a test, if there's testing, you know what I mean? If something's happening, even though sleep is always important, it's like we're paying even more attention if we know something big is happening.
Yes.
The day before. So like Dominic's friend kept asking him for a sleepover this weekend, and Dominic had a tournament. And we're like, he has a tournament tomorrow. He really needs to get his sleep. We didn't even want him to go to the friend's house because, right, you don't know what sugar that, like what he's intaking, what he's all having there, and that's going to impact his sleep. And he had to be up early the next day for a game, So,
I hear you. Well, Beckett had a sleepover this weekend, and they were up till 10:30, and they slept in the basement on a couch, big like sectional couch thing. And then when they woke up, or when I noticed that they're awake, then I asked like, hey, what time did you guys get up? And they're like 5:30. And I was like, Jesus, these kids are going to be a mess. Beck was a mess by the end of the day. And he fell asleep in the car at 3:00 on our way to like a 20-minute ride. But I knew, it was kind of like, okay, well, we're not going to be getting much done, and he's going to be whiny. And so I also removed him from electronics a lot, because I know he gets really, if he's tired, electronics are really bother him. I feel like they make him more, it's like it prevents him from being tired. It's probably all the blue light. I guess absolutely. Put on his blue blockers.
Blue light blockers. Well, and as we start concluding today and summarizing, it's like, I think if you are a parent, right, and you are recognizing that your children have tantrums and go insane with lack of sleep, let's flip that around and put the mirror on yourself. And can you start paying attention and realizing, I'm really irritable today. How was my sleep? I know you kind of talked about this before, but like, really examining yourself, examining what's happening, and noticing like, I feel so much better today, and noting how much sleep you need, because we need between, I know Dr. Matthew Walker says minimum of 7 hours. Everybody's different. So is it 7 for you? Is it 8 for you? Is it 9 for you? And kind of looking at what does that look like for you, and noting how you're feeling, and bringing that back to sleep.
Yeah, I think that's great. I would encourage everyone to, take, I think, at least 3 days, if not a week, and spend the time limiting, alcohol for 3 nights, limiting caffeine.
No phones in the bedroom.
Yeah.
Turn off your devices an hour before bed. No TV, no screen.
An hour before bed, and just winding down and taking a bath, or doing all the things that you need to do where there's no stimulation an hour before bed. And go set it at an earlier time, and maybe even don't even set an alarm. Like, see how, if you could just naturally slept, what that is. That sounds so lovely. We should do that ourselves.
It's interesting. We're back on school time. And so I've been a hard bedtime, 10 p.m. and my alarm is set for 6, but I've been waking up consistently at 5:50, so I feel good about that.
What time are you going to bed?
10. Okay. So that's 7 hours, 50 minutes. Yeah.
I go to bed at 9, Jess. Yeah. That's why if you text me at night, I never text you back.
I used to get, before children and no alarms, I would get 9 hours. I would sleep from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
But I mean, it's harder because you also have a teenager who's up a little later, because I don't have that.
This year she has not. baby girl is asleep. The other day when they're, it was like 8:45 because we have the boys lights out 8:30 and she's just going to bed too, which I'm so happy she's been doing.
We're lights out at 8 o'clock at our house for the kids.
Yeah. What time's your school start time?
8.
Yeah.
And they get up between
we're at school at 7.
6 and 7, but they get up naturally. We don't wake them up.
Yeah. Everyone's different. It just kind of depends. But like we've talked about before, difficult with sports, right? We have practice. It's hard. I don't think it'd be possible for us to get.
Well, honestly, that's up until literally this week, because now, there's some other commitments that the kids have that are changing their schedules. So
yeah. But yeah, if you can, right, doing what you can and watching your kids and monitoring your kids. But I'm excited for part 2, where we're not talking about problems anymore, but we're talking about the solutions. So we can really deep dive into what we've learned, what we've read about, and what Dr. Matthew Walker talks about, and how to improve your sleep and how to get a good night's rest.
Yeah. So I think this is, it's the only book you need on sleep. It has an incredible amount of insights, and it will definitely change the way that you think about sleep.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening and joining us today.
And don't forget to follow us on social media at Chasing Brighter or on our blog, chasingbrighter.com.